Whenever I visit someone at their home to view their reef tank, I usually walk away with a frag or come back surprised by something they did that left me baffled. This impressive reef aquarium belongs to Dan Thomas, a young aquarist with a blue thumb for SPS corals. His brain is that of an engineer, and if you stay with me throughout, I will share near the end and will show you something unique and special. You have to love reefing. Welcome everyone to another episode of VargasReef Chronicles. And don't anyone out there say anything about my hair. Yes, I know I need a haircut. Even Dan pointed it out. He said, how dare I come onto the camera with this ugly hairdo? But I don't have a choice right now. We just came in from Qatar to London or Heathrow.
Yeah.
And Dan, otherwise known as on Instagram,
Krusty's Reef,
picked me up at the airport. And we decided to come and take a look at his tank. So Dan, amazing tank.
Thank you.
I can't believe it. This tank is actually in a kitchen. So it really makes for an interesting walk-in. So when you walk into the kitchen and you make a right, there's this gorgeous tank here. So Dan, tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into the hobby.
So I've been in the hobby since I was 17. I'm 38 now, so over 21 years. I first got into it. My wife, my then girlfriend, we were sitting in her bedroom and her dad walked in and said, Dan, let's go to the fish shop. I was like, okay.
Fish shop?
Yeah, so he had a pond and he had freshwater tropical fish.
Nice.
So we went to this little fish shop in Stevenage, and I remember seeing it was a strange little shop, and he had do you remember the old planted like waterfall tanks?
Yes, absolutely.
It was one of those.
Like a terrarium type of thing, right.
But he was keeping fish in it, and there was a neon dotty back and a mithrax crab. And the mithrax crab was kind of being all territorial, and the dotty back was
with
kind
the
of
pincers.
Yeah, and the dotty back was just kind of bouncing at it, and I was just instantly like hooked. I was like, what is this? This is amazing. And then from then, I bought a tank within about a week, I think.
A week later.
Yeah, and I just started putting this tank together.
So you can thank your wife's or your in-laws.
Yeah, my late father-in-law.
And he's the one that encouraged you into getting into this, huh?
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's interesting because most people adapt. They go from fresh water into salt water.
Yeah.
Now, did you keep any fresh water or you just went right into salt water?
Pretty much salt water. I had a goldfish, I think, when I was younger.
But that was
straight into salt water, yeah.
Right. So when you went to the shop with your father-in-law, did you think at any time, when you walked in, you said, maybe I can do this? Or was it that instant that said to you, you're hooked?
I was hooked. I was instantly hooked. And I've had no money ever since.
It sounds like all of us. No money ever since. Hey, listen. It's better than some of the bad things you can do with money.
Definitely.
If you want to keep your kids away from drugs, get them hooked on this. Right? Okay, so what was your first tank? And what did you do? How did you progress?
My first tank was I think, just like anybody, just make lots of mistakes quite quickly. So I got a tank. I think it was a Regency 80, which was an Aqua 1 tank, and I think it was about 180 litres, so it was unusual size. It was about 3 foot long and about 3 foot high, but only about 15 inches wide.
Oh, it sounds like the typical arowana tank.
Yeah, so I kind of built a rockscape. My father-in-law had some old dead live rock in the garden. He said, you could take this. I was like, yeah, great. So I bleached it.
Okay, hold on a second, wait. He had live rock in his garden?
He never had a reef tank, he just had some rock. It was just some kind of rock. Yeah,
it was like a base. It wasn't real live rock.
No.
Okay.
No. So I took that I filled it up with salt water, an external canister filter,
Okay, yeah.
and that was it really. And the lights that came with the tank, just some. I think it might have even been T8s.
Okay.
At the time. So I started with that. Quickly, I realised I'd made a mistake. I think I bought,
Okay, what made you realize you made a mistake? What was it?
I bought a yellow tang, I think, which was obviously the first mistake for such a small tank. And I put it in, and it got ill quite quickly. And I think I did the
It got what?
It got ill quite quickly.
Oh, okay.
I started getting some spots, I think. Oh, I might have even killed it pretty much straight away. And I called the shops. I'd be like, typical, like, oh no, I bought this fish from you and it died. And very, very, very quickly I realised. He said, well, I've had that fish for maybe a month in the shop and it's been okay. And I thought, oh right, yeah, well.
Okay, so now you were progressively learning more,
Yeah.
upgrading your systems.
Yeah, so then I got my first flat. So I had that tank for maybe 3 years, and I started to be able to keep aquaporas and some montiporas. I got my first flat, so then I knew I wanted to get an 8 foot, a 6 foot tank I wanted in the flat. It was a first floor flat, so that's second floor in the US.
Yeah.
Top ones.
Right, because we don't,
Yeah,
we
you've got
don't
ground-
consider, it's the ground that's first floor.
Yeah.
Second floor is right above,
Yeah, so in the UK, the ground floor and then the first floor. So we were on. The
it could be
second floor.
the lobby, right?
Yeah.
So the first floor is the lobby,
Yeah.
and then the first floor is
Yeah.
actually our second floor.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I started with I had a 4 foot tank that my friend lent me, so I could move stuff in and just have a bigger tank when I started. And then I started planning my next tank, which was a 6 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot. So we had to get this up the stairs. We had a really narrow staircase. We had to get it to the top, and then it turned at the top. So we had to get this 6 foot. The guy that delivered it was really angry when he turned up. So we had to get it. We got it most of the way up, and then we had to lift it onto its end.
Right, so kind of stand it up,
Yeah,
twist it,
yeah,
and then,
yeah. I think there was 3 of us, but there's only space for 2 each side. So
and that was, and it was glass.
and it was glass. Yeah,
Right. So now you said your friend provided you with a tank,
yeah.
right? So did you have that type of friendship or that friend before the reefing, or
No. This was
so actually you met him because of the reefing?
Yeah.
So now you started developing a different social network, right? Because now your social network wasn't the guys you grew up with, they were actually people you met within the industry of reefing and saltwater,
Yeah.
and now they started becoming your friends.
Yeah. Even the job I've got now, so that where I work now, I've worked there for 17 years, and I met my manager through reef keeping as well.
Oh, so he's into it as well.
Yeah. So he's had a long break. He's just sort of set up another tank now.
Oh, so
Bits and pieces.
and it's interesting how we as hobbyists start to gravitate towards one another because we share this infinite passion for reefing, right?
Yeah.
And who's going to relate better to us than anyone that's associated with our hobbies,
Yeah.
right? Because typically the spouse doesn't relate to your hobby,
Right.
but every once in a while you do find a spouse or spouses that get along very well because of the hobby, but it's very rare. So you find a social network that you didn't even know before existed, right?
Right.
And now all of a sudden you become friends with them,
Yeah.
and this becomes your now
Yeah.
buddies to hang
Sure.
out with and discuss this all the
It
time.
helps me a lot as well. I'm a massive introvert, so normally when I meet people, I'm terrible. I've got nothing to say to people. My brain just goes completely blank. I've got nothing. But with reef keeping, I could just talk for hours.
Right.
Like people come round. I don't really like people coming round that much, but if it's to do with my fish tank,
Oh, if it's
come round.
right.
Come round.
So this is why Dan invited me to his house because Dan said, if this guy's into cars, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
If he's into women, I'm not interested. If he's into flying kites, I'm not interested. But he's into reefing. Let's get him over to the house and we can talk for hours, have coffee. This is what VargasReef Chronicles is all about. But it's interesting how we develop these networks of individuals into our lives that, because, now that you brought this subject up, it's interesting to me because I think back of all the people that I grew up with, right? So elementary school, intermediate school, high school, college, and you meet all these interesting people. And then at the end of the day, when you're invested in this, which by the way, spectacular, you invested in this, it's a whole different network of people.
Yeah.
You still keep your family because they're family, right? But your social network is different. And so you had your friend, let's go back.
Yeah.
You had your friend
Yeah.
provide you with a tank.
Yeah,
Now,
he said, I'm not using it, take it for now. So I took it. I just set it up as a little tank, and then I started picking bits and pieces up for the new tank. The new tank came, and that's when I first started having any real success with SPS. I love LPS. But it's mainly SPS is what I'm interested in.
Now, why the passion to SPS over the others? What is it the challenge? Because basically that's what I find in this industry is people are enthralled with challenge.
Yeah.
And if there's anything that's challenging, man, is an SPS. You can see a tank full of SPS, but that doesn't mean you're keeping every SPS.
No.
Right?
No, and I've struggled in this one. I was saying earlier, I've got an issue with tin at the minute, which I've had for about a year and a half. And it's low levels. It's maybe sitting at around 5 ppb, so super low levels of tin.
Right.
But I just find.
But it's higher than normal.
It should be 0. Tin's bad. You
Right.
shouldn't have tin in your tank. It's not. It's always 0 in the sea. You shouldn't have it in your
Right.
tank.
So, I mean, you and I were discussing this in the car on our way from the airport, and, there's so many factors into having tin in the water, but he did the proper IPC for his RO water, he did IPC for his salt water, right? So neither one of those, or the synthetic salt that you use to mix your water, neither of those carried any tin in them whatsoever. So it's either something dropped in the tank that's leaching the tin, or a piece of equipment.
Yeah.
But you're doing something to try to pinpoint.
So every month I take one piece of equipment out. I carry on. I do weekly water changes at the minute. I'd like to do less because it's expensive. So I do 220 litres. But basically a bucket of salt lasts me 3 weeks at the minute. So it's like every 3 weeks another bucket of salt. So I'd like to, ideally, because I'm using the Reef Elements method, where I am replacing all of the traces that are being used up, and I'm ICPing every month, and all of my nutrients are under control, there's not really a need to do water changes every week.
However,
But you should still do them occasionally at least.
yeah, because it's funny, I had this conversation with another hobbyist just recently, and when you do a water change, you notice the difference of the way the corals behave, right? That's an indicator that this water change is giving them something that's making them really happy. And I believe in water changes, maybe not every week, find a way to tone it to once a month, but the animals behave in a different manner every time you do a water change. Freshwater fish, whenever you do a water change and it's dramatic, they start spawning, right? So in salt water, you notice your corals, the polyp extension is greater. They fill up more. They get more puffy. And I find that so I always find that I think the solution of no water changes is a mistake. I think doing some water changes, but also you control your elements with Zelements, right?
Yeah. I like to hoover the sand occasionally as well. So once a month is about right, I think, for my system. But at the minute, because of the tin, I need to keep it down.
Right.
As soon as it starts getting over sort of like 6 or 7 ppb, then I start to really notice things are struggling. It's mainly the Millipora and tenuis anything particularly sensitive like that, so Millipora just goes brown, quite straight.
Because of the tin.
Because of the tin.
Just the tin. Wow.
Unless there's something I'm missing that I'm not seeing, the only thing I can see that's an issue is the tin.
Right.
Everything else is within a reasonable range.
Well, one thing for sure, I'm pretty sure you're going to find it.
Yeah.
By, like you said, removing one of the equipment.
Yeah.
Now, what do you do when you remove that equipment? How do you replace that equipment? What do you do?
So far it's been like I removed my filter roller. So the filter roller, it's not essential. It's helpful. It's not essential. So that's not
the filter roller.
Yeah.
Okay. Explain to me how the filter roller would be. I mean, I don't see any metal in the filter roller.
No, there wasn't. So
Right.
I've read so PVC tubing and piping that can contain tin.
Okay.
Glass. So when you make a tank, they
Right.
float it on organotin, I believe. So if you use glass a certain way around, then you can start getting readings of tin. But it's not. The tank's been here for 10 years now.
Right. And this tint toxification, has this been recent or is this
It's about
from a long time ago? I mean,
no, it's about a year and a half.
about
so
a year.
It's a
So
long time.
before this, there was never an issue with tin.
No, never. In the 10 years the tank's been set up, it's only been the last year and about a year and a half.
Right. Okay. So now, what are you doing? What equipment are you doing, and what's your time schedule?
I am testing everything. I don't think it is any specific piece of equipment. All the equipment I've got is kind of very well known, respected brands of stuff. So I don't really think it is anything. But I'm at the point where I've checked everything, and it's still there. So it's coming from somewhere.
Right.
I'm starting to think it's probably something. Maybe I've dropped something in the sand. I've gone through the sand with a magnet, and I did pick some bits out. But
Really?
Yeah. I picked a
What
couple of little bits out.
what did you pull out
Just little tiny crumbs of metal, and they can't have been in there forever. I used a good sand, so I used the Caribbean Sea special grade sea floor.
Okay.
And it's
Good sand.
It's great sand. The size is perfect. It doesn't blow around. I've got lots of flow in the tank, and it doesn't blow around. It's not so small that it blows around. It's not so big that you get lots of detritus building up in it.
Right.
The wrasse like it. So, yeah, I'm really happy with the sand.
Right, especially you have quite a few helicarus wrasses, you have macropharingodang wrasses in here, and those guys love to hibernate in the sand, especially that's where they go to sleep,
Yeah.
right? So if the sand is too coarse, you're going to notice it with the animal.
Yeah.
The animals are going to get scratched up and damaged. Whereas if it's too fine, then all these pumps are going to push the sand around.
Yeah.
So what is your next plan, or what is your next course of action to try to pinpoint this tin?
I don't like doing anything too drastic. I don't want to do anything that's going to It's in quite a good place, other than the tin. If it wasn't for the tin, I think it'd be quite a nice tank. I think it'd be a really nice tank.
Whoa, stop right there. Stop. I walked into this room because, when we first come in, we walk into your living room,
Yeah.
right? And he has an amazing sound system. I mean, amazing. The speakers are just outrageous. The sound system, we were listening to Queen on it, and oh my God, it's just mind-blowing, right? But I'm sitting there and I'm going, okay, do you have a special room for it? And I'm not saying anything, we're enjoying our time. And then I said, okay, time for the tank. And we walk into the kitchen and I make a right. And the first thing I go is, oh my God. I felt like Janice from Friends. I was like, oh my God. The tank. So I understand you're being modest, but this tank is absolutely beautiful, spectacular. There's no words to describe this tank. It's just mind-blowing, and it's really beautiful. What are you going to do to remove the tank?
I think I'm going to remove the sand slowly. It's drastic. I've avoided it up until now.
You know you can test to see if it's the sand by taking a sample and having it analyzed.
Yeah.
So you may not have to remove it all,
Yeah.
but maybe removing it all, you'll find a piece of metal that's sitting inside of it. So my other question to you is, so what's your plan? Which type of equipment are you going to attack next?
I think the last pump I haven't changed is my return pump, so I think I'm going to change that. That's probably about 4 years old now, so I might replace that. We were talking about the Abyss pumps.
Yeah. Well, you know, to me, I swear by Abyss. It's a pump that has a titanium shaft, and the warranty on it is life, right? How many companies out there are so confident with their product that they're going to give you a lifetime warranty? Not many. I don't think of any. I think Abyss is the only one.
Yeah, a year is standard for everything.
Right. And you know, you look at, and it's built like a brick house, but then again, it's a German product, right? I mean, you look at all the products that are made for the aquarium trade. The German product is like amazingly superior.
Yeah.
You know, their pumps are amazing, their lights are amazing, their tanks are amazing. Yeah. What could you say? Yeah. You know, even in the shop back in Qatar, I will not get a tube of silicone unless that silicone comes and is made in Germany. It can say made in Germany and still being made in China. So you have to look carefully. But I will not use anything other than German silicone because it is bulletproof. Yeah. It's the best in the market, and you can see by their equipment, they make the most awesome equipment. Yeah. And so, you know, the whole European thing. Yeah. How did you discover that it was tin in the water?
Through ICPs.
Okay, so you noticed that there was a problem and that's why you started doing ICP? Or did you start doing ICP so that way you knew what your parameters were?
No, so I do see a lot of people saying, I've got an issue, so I've sent an ICP off. But I don't think that's the best way to use them. I think the best way to use them is to spot an issue before it becomes an issue. So I was doing an ICP every 4 weeks. And I just noticed that, my tin's gone up a little bit. I think it had gone up to, it had always been 0. I looked back through all my ICPs, it had always been 0. And then all of a sudden, it was like 4 ppb. So then I started trawling back over my Ultimate Reef build thread. I was thinking, what have I changed? So I was thinking, I changed my dosing line, so I'll try that. And then I've changed, maybe added a pump, so I'll try that. I've changed, and I've gone over it and over it. But I think the best way to use them, apart from monitoring all of your traces and your nutrients, they're perfect for seeing anything that may become an issue, rather than if I hadn't and I just continued with the water change every 4 weeks at the time, then it would have just kept going up, and I would have started to lose things, and I'd be like, I'm doing water changes and I can't see any issues. Why am I losing things? I'd have no idea. Right. So I'm a big believer in ICPs.
Okay, and you know what? I agree with you, because I look at it this way. When your tank is at its best, do an ICP. Yeah. Because when your tank starts going south, you do another ICP and you compare them. And you say to yourself, this was at its best and this is now. What's the problem?
Yeah.
And that's the best way to diagnose it. Because just because it says that this element has to be at this certain level doesn't mean that your tank is not functioning properly, right? You can have all these different levels that may not match up to where they say it has to be, but your tank is designed to be at those levels. And that's how you should be using the ICP test. Don't look at it as these are the numbers where I need to be. Because remember one thing, what they're giving you is the average seawater composition. I firmly believe, and I started doing this, I would say 20 years ago. I went to Tubataha and the Great Barrier Reef, and where else? So somewhere in Jakarta. And I took a water sample and I had a hot test kit and Salifert. And I tested the water to see what was the true calcium level. For example, I went down and right above a coral head of Acropora, I opened the capsule, the bubble went up, and I sealed the capsule. And I took that water and I tested it. And everyone recommends 400 calcium. I found 360 in the Great Barrier. I found 360 in Tubataha. And I found, I think it was 380 in the coral reef in Jakarta. And that was their calcium level. Now, does that mean that that calcium level is there at that number all the time? No. You got currents flowing, you got things going on, you got thermoclines happening, the water temperature changes dramatically. So does that mean that we need to be at 400? No, we're at 400 because we grow corals faster than they grow in the ocean. So because we grow them so fast, we have different parameters. But this leads back to what I was saying before. If your tank with a certain amount of parameters is successful and is doing great, those are your numbers. Yeah. Don't go chasing numbers that you don't need to chase. And you find this all the time. Oh, I need to be at this number. No, you don't. You need to be at a number where your tank is the most successful. And that's how I see ICP playing a big role in the success of many aquariums. That's when you take the ICP, now your tank is going south, do another ICP, and you compare the two.
Showing you the Recordia, and I've got, I cut maybe 10, 20 Recordias out because I'm trying to contain them in that spot.
Yeah.
And well, I'm losing.
You're losing that battle.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, I said to him, wow, you got a lot of beautiful Recordia in here. And he goes, it started out as one. Anyone that has kept Recordia for a lengthy period of time know that Recordia is not a fast-growing coral. It grows very slowly. But in his tank, maybe it's the tin. Maybe it's the tin. I mean, his Recordia is like all over the place. And it's a beautiful, I would say, pinkish orange color.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. And
Recordia Florida.
And it's vibrant, very vibrant. I mean, it just like makes the rock shine. Yeah. So, yeah, at least that's growing out of control.
That's the thing. When people come and see the tank, and I've got all these SPS that I try my hardest to keep alive, and it's always the Recordia that people are always most impressed with.
Right, because it's so brightly colored.
Yeah, it's my wife's favourite as well.
Well, okay, so now that we're on favorites, which one is we're going to start off with fish. Which one is your favorite fish?
I'd say my goldflake angel. So that goldflake angel, my wife bought me for my 30th birthday, so that's 8 years ago now. It's a wild caught, so I think it cost a lot of money now. Well, they were a lot of money back then anyway.
Gold flakes were always expensive. They were never cheap.
No, it was a fish that I'd always wanted, and I thought, I don't like spending a lot of money on one fish. If I'm going to buy like a shoal of Anthias or something, I don't like spending lots of money on one fish. But that was one that I really
Yeah, and what was great, it was a present.
Yeah.
You know, and it's nice to see that he has a honey that knows what he likes. And she went and got it to him. How surprised were you when you got it? Or did you know it was coming? I mean,
no, so I think she had me a cake made and it had a gold flake on it.
no.
Yeah,
On the cake.
yeah, it had a gold flake and a conspic. I've always wanted a conspic angel.
Oh,
but
that's another
chance.
holy grail fish.
I think it had what did it have? A gold flake, a conspic angel, and a red-tailed tamarin. I think it was a great cake, and then and an envelope, and I think it just said gold flake on it, and it was just the money to buy a gold flake angel.
Oh, so okay. I thought she went and picked it out for you. No. Okay, so it was an envelope with the money.
Yeah.
And she knew how much the gold flake was.
Yeah.
See, most husbands hide everything from their wives, right? They say, well, how much was that fish? $50.
Yeah.
How much is that coral? $25.
No, she's,
and then the day you die, she sells everything for $50, $25, and you spend a lot more.
Yeah, don't.
No, okay. So
yeah,
she gave you the money to go buy it. However, was it there and available and ready for you, or did you have to order it?
No, so I went to AAC.
Of course.
And they occasionally had them in. So I like visiting AAC. So I kind of waited it out. I was waiting until they had one, and then I went in one day and they had one, and it was the size of my thumbnail. It was
tiny.
It was tiny, and I put it in, and it swam into a little cave down there, and my yellow tangs, I think 2 yellow tangs, just kept picking at it. So I spent 4 hours with just a PVC rod, just hitting the fish away. Like, get away.
Get away, you're misbehaving.
Yeah, and it settled down really quickly, and then it's just been ever since. And
Well, I think there she is right there. I think she's full grown.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, she's not particularly big, but I put a lot of food in. Maybe it's just the tank size. Maybe whenever I see it in other tanks, they're smaller tanks.
She is. I never seen them any bigger than this.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure they are bigger because, one time, one of my favorite fish is Ginacanthus semifasciatus. It's a gorgeous angelfish that comes out of northern Philippines, and it's one of the most striking angelfish. And what I like more about them is the fact that they're planktivores. So they're never eating from the rock, and they're always eating from the water column, which allows you to believe that they do not pick on corals. I've kept them many times, and I've never had any coral issues. LPS, SPS, zoanthids, never touch any of it. And I was always used to seeing them typically about this big.
Okay.
Nice, gorgeous super males this big. Then I went to the Dallas Aquarium, where I saw one this big. And I was like, no way. That fish gets that big. Now bear in mind, it was in a probably 5,000 gallon tank, and it was 10 years old. So I saw it, and it was like, holy cow, they get this big? But I've never ever seen anyone catch one in the wild that big.
Yeah.
So I believe that because of the size of the tank and the fact that this fish can swim slow and not worry about being eaten, that it can get to that size, providing that it has the right environment to do so. In the wild, I don't think it will ever get that big. But to see one this big, when you're used to seeing them this big, it's like, can it happen? So I've never seen one bigger than yours, and I've seen many of them about the size of yours.
Yeah.
What are you dosing on a daily basis?
So I'm running Reef Elements. I'm running the new H2, the hybrid 2-part method.
Hybrid 2?
Yeah. So
Okay.
you've got Complete, which is your calcium. and then you've got a pH plus and normal. You've got complete and pH plus, and then universal is your calcium. So I've got my system set so that it alternates between the pH plus and the complete. So the pH plus will increase your pH,
right,
where the complete won't really increase your pH.
right. So it doesn't affect your pH at all.
Yeah, so I've got it set so that if my pH goes over 8.3, then it switches to complete, and then if it goes under 8.3, it switches to pH plus.
Interesting.
So I try and keep it around that level.
Right, and the Apex is monitoring and keeping this.
Yeah, I've currently got the Apex doing it, but the KH manager has got an update coming as well, so you can do it with that, with the dosing pumps, with the D&D
So
dosing
the
pumps.
KH is your KH monitor is the D&D.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long have you had that up and running now?
About a year and a half.
And
So-
you find that it works perfectly.
It's great, yeah. I had my Alcatronic before, which I really liked, and it saved me quite a few times. When I was away, I had a dosing line split, and it dosed for me. But I just found it was quite needy. It needed a lot of maintenance. Whereas
How so?
it's
Like
just
what?
a lot of calibration, and it doesn't leave you alone. It constantly sends you messages to say, you need to calibrate this, you need to calibrate this. And it was like, I can't remember if it was like monthly or every 4 weeks or something. Whereas the D&D, I hardly touch it. It maybe, I think it's like every 4 to 6 months, I think it needs calibrating. And other than that, all I do is is make up the reagent, and that's it. And it's super easy.
Mm-hmm. So all of this is being done with Reef Supplements, right?
Yeah. So
Right.
I've got all Reef elements for my dosing, and then my KH manager just monitors everything.
And what else do you put into the system besides what we just talked about from Reef Elements?
So the Reef elements, I also dose from my ICPs. I will make up a trace mix. So I've got 2 trace mixes because some things you can't mix together.
Right.
So off the top of my head, there's iodine, manganese, molybdenum, lots of zinc, cobalt,
Okay.
chromium, copper.
So you're putting copper in the system?
Yeah, very, very
Well, yeah, it's very
tiny amount of copper.
right.
Basically, just trying to keep it at natural seawater levels.
Right.
So just as close to the ocean as I can, really.
Right. Well, I mean, the tank does illustrate that it's functioning properly, and it looks really, really good. It's a fascinating tank. All right. So now, what is your maintenance practice with this system?
It's quite easy. So I'm doing a lot of water changes, but one thing I made sure when I first started the tank was that everything was going to be easy. So the first tank is my frag tank, but it also acts as a settlement and water change tank. So I have a couple of taps, so I can turn 2 taps, and it completely isolates that sump.
Right.
So the water will just go straight into the main sump. Then there's another tap that I can turn, and that goes straight to the waste.
Okay. So
So I can drain that.
right.
I've got a pump in there that I will turn on, and it will just mix it. If anything has settled in the bottom, it will start mixing in the water, and then I just drain it.
Then drain. So all that sediment goes away with the drain.
Yeah, straight into the drain. And then I close it. Then I've got a water barrel in the shed that I'll have pre-made some salt water, and I pump it straight back in.
Right.
So
Now, the shed is outside, right?
yeah,
Okay.
it's just here. Yeah.
And obviously you have a heater and
Yeah.
the
So
temperature controlling that water.
yeah. So I've got a big 400 gallon a day RO unit. Heater, just fill it up. So a water change, super easy. Literally the day before, I'll fill the RO up. It takes about 4 hours, I think, to fill that up. And then before I leave for work, I'll just turn the heater and the pump on. When I come back, just put the salt in. It takes maybe 10 minutes for it to mix completely. And then actually draining and refilling it, it's about 20 minutes.
And what salt are you using?
The D&D dosing formula.
Okay.
So I like that. It's around the KH that I like. I've ICP'd it before and all the levels.
So what KH is that salt at?
It's around 7.
7.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's where you like keeping your alkalinity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And now your calcium, what levels do you like keeping it?
That's between 400 and 420, usually around 400.
Okay. And your pH?
pH usually about between 8.2 at night and 8.3 in the day. I've just come back from Athens, and while I was away, my skimmer turned off because I've got one of the Davy Jones skimmate lockers that's hooked up to the apex.
Oh,
So
yes.
it filled up and it turned off.
Right.
So the skimmer's been off for 2 days, 2 or 3 days, which I hadn't realised. So my pH has dropped slightly. So I think it's this morning when we looked, I think it was at 8.1. But by sort of 6 or 7 tonight, it'll be 8.2, and then it'll kind of creep back up again.
Okay. So you said you have a refugium.
Yeah.
So what kind of algae are you growing in your refugium?
The Ketomorphia.
Ketomorphia. And how often do you harvest it?
Very rarely.
Really?
Yeah, I dose a lot of iron, but
Right.
again, my iron is always,
And that's feeding the Ketomorphia.
yeah.
I mean, it's feeding the algae.
So it's in there, and I've got lots of copepods and amphipods in there.
Oh, perfect.
But it doesn't, yeah, I'm not sure how much it really pulls. My nutrients are okay, so my nitrate is about 12 to 15. I'd like it a little bit lower, but I'm not going to chase it.
And your pH, I mean your phosphates?
Phosphate, again, it's a bit higher than I'd like it. It's probably about between 0.08 and 0.1, but no matter how much I change like my phosphate remover, my RioPhos, it seems to hover around there. So
Right.
I'm not going to start doing anything drastic to try
Well,
to change it.
and you know what? I wouldn't either. If this were my tank, I wouldn't fester with it very much because at this point in time, you can see that the corals are doing really, really well, and you're not having a hard time with, you know, your corals. They're doing absolutely great, and the fish look perfect. So I wouldn't change that very much. But I'm surprised you don't harvest it at all, huh?
No, maybe every couple of months I'll pull maybe a bucket out. But yeah.
And do you feed it to your tanks, or do you donate it to
Yeah, I usually just give it away. People normally
Right.
come and take a bucket.
Because I'll tell you, having a shop, people are always asking for it.
Yeah.
When can you bring in some Cheetomorphia? I'm like, nah, I'm not bringing that thing in. You bring it in, and then all of a sudden it's a mess and it's dying because you're not giving it the right nutrients.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of fish poop and things like that really help it out. Did you notice that since you put the filter roller, the algae grows less? Or did you find, you know, because there is something to be said about the filter roller. I'll be honest with you. Ever since the filter roller came into the market, I see more clear water than I had ever seen before. I go see somebody's reef tank, and no matter how beautiful and how big the tank was, if it didn't have any kind of micron filtration, the water had a tint.
Yeah.
Right? Today, because of the filter rollers, the waters are really clear.
Yeah.
So you notice the big change. Did that affect your algae growth at all?
I didn't notice any algae, any change with that. I did notice the skimmer stopped pulling nearly as much as it used to.
Right.
I don't run all my water through the filter roller. I only run about half of it at a time.
Oh,
So
how do you manage that?
So I've got, after my first sump, I've got 2 bulkheads. So one bulkhead goes down next to the skimmer inlet. The other bulkhead goes straight into the filter roller.
Okay, so it's draining in 2 places at the same time
Yeah.
in the same water volume?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's roughly 50-50 on.
Right.
I don't know.
Because what I have noticed is ever since the filter roller has come into the market, people are downgrading their protein skimmers because their protein skimmers are pretty much shut down.
Yeah.
So why have this big elaborate protein skimmer when you can get the same kind of results? I always say, just add more fish.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you go through more filter rollers, right? But add more fish. I mean, a reef tank without fish is really not a reef tank,
No.
right? So having the additional fish to provide you with that extra poop. I mean, the poop are feeding the corals anyway,
Yeah.
right? But it's being suspended and the suspension goes into your filter roller. But the addition of fish actually help the corals. And you're not moving a lot of water volume through the tank. Most individuals who keep an SPS tank have a 10-time flow rate,
Yeah.
right? You do not.
No. No, 10's always used to be what everyone was sort of aimed for, but yeah. You think if it's going through your sump 4 times an hour, that times that by 24, you know, that's your water's getting filtered a lot
Right.
in a day, and you've still got filtration in the tank with your live rock,
Mhm.
so it seems to work.
Right. Okay. So, because look, I think David has a through circulation of 20 times an hour.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I showed you pictures of his corals
Yeah.
today,
Yeah.
and it's like, it's craziness.
Yeah.
You know, he's building this tank into a big calcium block,
Yeah.
whereas, you know, a tank like this, you can see how well it's doing. So, which one is your favorite aquapora? What?
I really like the AAC sourberry. That's a great sort of mix of yellows, greens, and reds. But anything really. I'm not really too fussy. I really like basic corals. You know, I'm not one of these people that sort of chases all these fancy new, like strange name.
Oh, being
corals.
that you're an SPS guy,
Yeah,
that you like.
I just get
You're-
things that I like. So
Yeah.
yeah. Even the
Good.
basics.
You're not chasing trends.
Yeah,
You're actually going after things that
Yeah.
you like,
yeah.
that
And
you
like
enjoy.
You can't have a tank without having a stylo milker. That's the colour on a stylo milker is just great.
Yeah.
And you can't give frags of that away now. There's so much of it around. People sort of turn their noses up at it. But I love
Imagine
it's
that.
such a great tank.
I mean, 10 years ago, if you told somebody, I'll give you a piece of Milka, they'd be like, oh,
Yeah.
yes, great.
Yeah.
You know, and are you aware that Milka is probably one of the only SPS corals from the Red Sea?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So it started off in a aquarium museum environment where they were allowed to collect from the Red Sea, and then it just outgrew there, and then they spread it to other aquariums, and then those aquariums wound up spreading it to the hobbyists, and now it's, you know, that coral started in the Red Sea, and now it's globally everywhere on the planet. It's in Australia,
Yeah.
it's in the US, it's here in the UK, it's throughout all of Europe, it's in Asia. I know for a fact it's in China.
Yeah.
So there's more of that coral everywhere around the globe than there probably is in the Red Sea.
Wow.
Could you imagine? We have gotten to grow corals to a point where now there's more corals on land than there is where they come from. Think about that.
Yeah.
You never think about that, but even your regular, you know, your Montepora here, Setosa.
That's probably one of my favourite corals, I think. My wife's called that lava.
Interesting. I would have called that. That's a good name for it.
Yeah. And it's just such a bright coloured coral. I just think it's beautiful.
Right. And it's an SPS coral that if you look at 100 tanks, probably 80 of them have Setosa in it.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those corals that is a great beginner coral because it does really well. I mean, I've had situations in the shop where certain tanks have gone south really bad and certain things could not live. But that Setosa, the Setosa and the Duncan Opsomnia,
Yeah.
that's a beautiful LPS coral. Even though it only comes in like 2 color variations, it's just bulletproof.
Yeah.
You can throw Duncan Opsomnia in toilet water and I think the damn thing will live.
So I found that with the hammer corals as well. Like I say, I had a tank crash a few years ago, and I just left it. I kind of got really disheartened with the tank for a while. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I've always had a tank, so I couldn't bring myself to sell because of my fish. My fish kept me in the. Even though I'm predominantly a coral guy, the fish kept me.
Especially that gold flake.
Especially the gold flake, and I'm glad I did. But the only corals that survived me just ignoring the tank for that time after the crash were the hammer coral and the Goniopora and the Recordias.
And it's interesting you say Ganophora because a lot of people have issues with keeping Ganophora. They go, Tony, my Ganophora is dying. Tony, my Ganophora. Meanwhile, in the shop, to be honest with you, in the shop in our display tanks, or not display tanks, the coral selling tanks, all we do is just water changes there. We don't monitor. I mean, I have a strict policy in the shop. All coral systems must have an 8.3 pH or higher. Every single tank. And I think there's something in the air in Qatar that allows me to get away with that.
Yeah.
Also, I think the door opening and closing a lot prevents a lot of CO2 buildup in the house, because that's one of the things that we do not monitor, but we should be monitoring it, because the CO2 levels in a house will affect your pH.
Yeah, I notice it a lot. My wife works from home, and the day she's here, my pH is lower than the day she's not here.
Right, and that's where the vacation syndrome comes into play. If you are in a house where there are kids, there's gas range, and the gas range means that you're cooking with fire, you light candles, you have potted plants in the house, your CO2 levels are actually high. And it's easy to measure. Just get a monitor and you'll find that a typical household has about 1,200 in the house of CO2. The outside, supposed to be 350, but typically now we're about 450. So when you go on vacation and no longer is that range being turned on, no candles, nobody breathing, your pH is going to fluctuate upward because there's not that much CO2 in the house. And bear in mind that the protein skimmer is sucking up a lot of that CO2. So now you go on vacation, your CO2 levels drop, your pH fluctuates up, and your tank is going absolutely crazy. And I realized this a long, long time ago. I went on vacation, and the whole house went on vacation. I came back, all my corals had RTM.
Oh, yeah, alkalinity dropped.
My alkaline, well, no, the pH went up so high that everything just...
I find when my pH goes up, my alkalinity goes down, just because the uptake increases quite a lot.
So back to in Qatar, so our tanks are kept at 8.3, and our alkalinities 8 or 9, all the time, 8 or 9. And all we do is just water changes. I'll put in a gonopora in those tanks, and they do absolutely spectacular. And I can have that gonopora for a month, and it's doing fantastic. We're not doing anything special to it. Customer takes it home. 2 weeks later, he's complaining that the gonopora died. Meanwhile, I have still others of the same ones that he took, and they're still doing great in the shop. And I think it has a lot to do with pH and alkalinity. I think it's more than manganese, because manganese is the new thing, right? Oh, the manganese, you need to raise the manganese. I don't even monitor manganese. Don't monitor it at all. All I care about is pH, phosphates, and alkalinity. That's all I want my girls to monitor. And when they give me the numbers, I look at it, okay, fine. And the corals are doing great. Corals are doing great. So I don't know where the problem is, but my point is that your tank suffered. And your gonopora did just fine.
Yeah.
You weren't monitoring anything.
No, I didn't do anything. I did no water changes.
And it wasn't receding or anything, right?
No, it wasn't as fluffy as it normally is, but
right. But it didn't die on you.
Didn't die.
And how long did that situation last?
that was a couple of years, I think.
A couple of years?
Yeah.
That you just let it go?
Just fed the fish. Didn't do any water changes. I was just so disheartened with it. I can't imagine it now. I'm on it as much as I possibly can. I come home from work, I run in to see the tank, and then I go see my wife, see if she's okay.
You see what takes priority in this house? The tank and then the wife. Oh, and then you got the dog too that you have to.
Dog. I've got to see the dog as well.
Yeah, well, I think the dog comes see you before you.
Yeah.
That's the one that greets you at the door.
Yeah.
Right? But okay, so you wound up in that slump.
Yeah.
What took you out of the slump? What was it? Because I've had slumps too.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a little story, but I want to hear your story first. Subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell. And until next time, you have to love reefing.